Hello, and welcome to another week at the bungalow. So the saga continues. We're trying to get jobs done before we get plasterers back in to finally get the family room plastered. To start with, we are working on a couple of partition walls. These are going either end of the kitchen. One is going at the far end, which is covering up all the services, all the pipe work, drainage and everything that's running up the corner of the kitchen and down to up to the shower above and down to the island connections. And then this end covers up the other end of the kitchen, so we've got like an L-shaped kitchen going in. This has some services in it, in as much as sort of light switches and stuff like that, and power that goes down into one of the cupboards. So pretty bulk standard type carcassing. Pretty much using whatever timber we've got left. Doesn't need to be anything too special, it's just the measurements that need to be correct, because obviously we've got a kitchen that's going in there of a certain distance, and so this is making up the end panel. Just so you don't walk into the main area and see sort of the end panel of a kitchen. More so that it looks from the as you walk in that the wall continues on, and then just around the corner is the kitchen. So that's the idea behind it. And then this is the area we're trying to cover up with the other carcassing. So boiler's already in. We've got a floor to ceiling cupboard going over the whole boiler and all the pipework and everything underneath, which will have a panel in the back of the cupboard so you can't see that. But just to make up the difference in between the two, where all the flow and return from the boiler and everything else is. This is what we're trying to cover up or box in. So once again, pretty standard. As you can see from the video, gone slightly out of turn here. As in the previous video we were doing the drywalling, and now that suddenly disappeared. It's just where we're trying to get so many different jobs done all at the same time. Desperately trying to get those plasterers in. So as I said before, hidden within the boxing is flow and return supply pipes, and also the soil stack from the shower upstairs. We've also got in there a mains pressure pump, so we're trying this one out. Pressure in the bungalow is pretty low and we're running quite a few showers, so we'll be interested to see how that gets on, but we're pumping the whole mains pressure, so not just hot and cold to each of the different showers, it's the whole lot. But we'll let you know how that gets on. Back to a few bits of plasterboard. So this is front door surround. Either side of the door we've got the standard cavity closers, and obviously in the lintel above there's some insulation in the metalwork. So the plasterboard gets glued to the blockwork and to the cavity closer, and of course to the lintel above, using a couple or piece of timber just to wedge it in place. The two ends of the piece of plasterboard will be held by the sides. And then just while it's going off, a couple of plasterboard screws just into the blockwork just to hold it tight. So as you can tell, we're moving thick and fast through the jobs this week. Window boards is the next process. So we bought from Travis or equivalent standard window boards. This is chopping out for the brackets. So pretty much going to be held by the plaster that comes down the walls and plaster that holds the brackets into the wall. A couple of screws just into the blockwork at the front. But all in all, that's it. Just getting them to seat home properly. And nice and flush up against the window frame. And then exactly the same as the front door. Got plasterboard going around the windows. With the original, that all the cavities have already been closed. They use blockwork to close them up. We haven't dug all that back out to put anything back in. We've filled the walls with the polystyrene beads, and so they're pretty dangerous to try and remove all that. So leaving that is, and just adding the plasterboard on top to give us a nice clean edge around the window. Hallway window, and as you can see, cavity closers back in because it's our blockwork. And then exactly the same process as the front door, using the construction adhesive or equivalent, sticking it up onto the underside of the lintel. Like I say, that's already got the insulation in between the metalwork. So covering up that insulation in the hallway. Got the plasterboard going up. Bit of a tight squeeze now we've got the staircase in. Probably should have done this first. But you live and learn. Measuring out here to find out where the downlighters go in. So we can cut the hole in the plasterboard and fish the wires through. And as always, screw gun, absolutely invaluable. Just makes this job a load easier, especially when you're working above your head. Small infill piece here going above the bathroom door. So we've already marked where the cables were roughly in the ceiling for the light fixture. We're using downlighters. These are slightly different. They're plastering downlighters, so the fitting and everything has to go in now. All the wiring goes in first, then the plaster is actually plaster over it, so you literally just have a round hole in the ceiling with a bulb in it. So once again, this is something new to us and we're trying these. So around the outside of the fitting where you screw it to the plasterboard, there's like a meshy type surround, so the plaster can get a decent key into it and just screw it to the plasterboard. We're hoping it makes it for a nice clean finish. Other side of the staircase, by the front door and into the entrance to the family room, kitchen. Decided to get the plasterboard lift out. Did try and lift it ourselves without, but sheet was just a bit too big. It's just over half. And this just makes life so much easier. It's just the fact of manoeuvring it into place, especially when you've got all sorts of stuff like staircases in the way now. When it's just a big entry room like it was upstairs, it's a lot easier. Bit of brute force and ignorance, and gets her into place. Last piece just here. Up and out of the way. Okay, so this wall looks like it's absolutely been through a war. We've got the old sockets from previously. We've got the new sockets that we've put in, and then there's also the fact that we had a little bit of a rearrange, because initially the boiler was going to go on the outside wall in a steel cupboard, but after some investigation that was decided it was a particularly bad idea, and that they don't particularly like being outside. So all of this has taken a bit of a rethink, and we've had a bit of a rejiggle around with regards to the kitchen. There's also the fact that since planning all of this, I've discovered that I can make the cabling a lot simpler. So there's a bit of a rejig required. Here where I'm standing at the moment, I had far too many switches that weren't required for isolating different things. I did have a separate switch in for each of the ovens and hob, and all of it can be controlled by one, so a bit of a rearrange on the cabling there. Also, with putting an extra cupboard in and having the boiler in the kitchen, I've had to move over this side where I'm standing now, so the extract has moved over slightly. So it's all a bit of a rejig, but thankfully once plastered it'll all go missing and all be lost. But at the moment it looks very confusing. Main thing is once it's plastered, and this is what you have to look over with all these things, once it's plastered there'll only be certain things that you can see. It just gets very confusing at this point. Into the lounge, consumer unit there at the bottom. So here, knocking some plaster off, got cables coming down, which are the black ones, which is all the TV aerial cables for all the different rooms in the house. We've got them in all the bedrooms. We've also got them in the lounge, in the family lounge room area. So I think we've got 6 different TV points around the house. Main aerial comes down into this room along with next to the consumer unit, and then got an amplifier that's going to then boost it around the house. Trying to keep this and the sort of data cable that comes from the front gate, or what will be the video entry system. So trying to keep them away from the power cables that you can see there on the right hand side. Not entirely sure how much interference is caused by the electrical cables and against the TV cables, etc., but just trying to keep them separate and out of the way. We've done exactly the same with regards to holes through the joists. So all of the TV cables run in their own holes rather than sharing with the power cables. Underestimated the amount of cables that need to go in there, so another trim out of a bit more plaster. Possibly would have been easier just to knock all this plaster off in the first place. But you don't always see that when you're in the middle of it. There we have it. All nice and flat, ready to get plastered over. Exactly the same will happen to the power cables at a later date. So as you can see, we've got a small log burning stove, for want of a better word, there in the fireplace. So that was just the box standard 1950s fireplace that we took out, nothing particularly special. Lintel going in. The log burner's temporarily connected up, but obviously that flue will be replaced by a nice piece of cast stove pipe. So we're through all the concrete, and it's just the reinforcing bar in the lintel that's holding this together. A little bit of persuasion needed. So the fireplace has been sitting here quite happily without a lintel underneath the brickwork. I mean, you can see it's sagging slightly, but it was like that when we took the original fireplace out. But it's just belt and braces. It gives us a nice square edge and just cleans it up. So the lintel gets put in onto the two pads, and then it's packed out with a bit of slate on either end, and then we put slate in between the brickwork and the lintel just to wedge it. Once this is done, just packing basically with the mortar mix to close up the gap. Feeding in as much as we can. And as is always the case with all these jobs, as soon as the plaster arrives, it'll all be lost. And you won't see any of the work that you put in. So what, we've got some leftover muck. Just a little job to finish off with. Filling up the gaps left by the old central heating pipes that we pulled out many months ago. And that brings us to the end of this week. I thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.